What's up everyone, welcome to this video. Now today we're going to conclude this series of videos by looking at how we can log out users. So the way we can achieve this on the server side is by basically revoking the tokens that we give to users. Now this can be access as well as refresh tokens. So what we want is a user not to be able to use their token after logging out. So the way we achieve this but just depends on your use case, but what we're going to do is to implement token revoking by basically setting up a block list, which is basically sort of like a persistent database table where we're going to basically keep track of these tokens that we have revoked. And for every time we shall use a token, we shall check that database table for if that token is actually saved within our database. Seems simple. Let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is to set up that block list that's going to help us to keep track of those tokens that we have revoked. To do that, we're going to create a database model similar to what we created, which is our user account table right here. So to do that, we're going to begin and set up a class. So we're going to call this class token block. So this is actually going to be our token block list, and this is going to be a DB model, so it's going to inherit from db.model. And once we've been able to do this, the next thing is going to be for us to basically provide some attributes onto this specific class. So our first attribute is going to be our ID, and this ID is going to be a column, so we shall say db.column, and we shall define the type of this column, so it's going to be an integer, so we shall say db.integer. And the next thing is going to be for us to basically provide it as the primary key, so we shall set the primary key attribute to true. So this will basically make sure that this is our primary key. The next thing we shall keep track of is going to be the JTI, which is going to be the unique identifier for each JWT that we shall have. Now this unique identifier is going to be universally unique, meaning that each JWT will have a unique ID for every JWT that will be created. So let's go ahead and keep track of this. So we can say that our JTI is going to be a db.column, and in this case shall have a db.string. Now since this is a UUID, you can still feel free to use the UUID field if you're using a database such as Postgres, but I'm using SQLite, which does not fully support that, so I have to basically go ahead and store them as strings. So I'll basically say that this is not going to be nullable, so I'll set a nullable constraint right here. I'll say nullable is going to be equal to false. Another thing I may need is going to be the time at which we basically revoke the token. So for us to achieve that, we have to basically set up a column which is going to be created at, and this is going to be storing a timestamp, so shall say db.column, and in this case we shall say db.datetime. So this will be our datetime field, and this datetime field will have a default, so I'll say that our default is going to be equal to our datetime.utc now. Now if you're wondering where I got this from, I got it from basically importing datetime. So I'll say from datetime import the datetime class, and then we shall go ahead and basically set it up as a default right here. So now that we've been able to do this, the next thing is going to be for us to basically create a simple string representation of every object that will be formed out of this class. So we do that in SQL Alchemy. We define the danda repre method, so shall say danda repre, and in this case shall say self, and all we need to do is to just simply return the string representation of that object. Now in this case we may come and say that this is going to be our token, and just in case we want to return the JTI, we shall say return JTI, then the JTI. So this will be self.jti. So once we've been able to create this specific field, the next thing we have to do is to go ahead and create our database for this token block list. So what I'm going to do is to go within my terminal. I have some stuff open here, so what I'll do is to first get out of the current terminal, and to create our database I'm going to be using a very hacky way to create the database, but you can still feel free to use a tool such as Flask Migrate to basically go ahead and help you run migrations to basically change the way your database structure is. So I'll begin by first of all going to our Flask shell. So I'll come right here and say Flask shell. And within our Flask shell, I'll first of all import the database model for which we want to create in the database. So to do that, I'll say from the models.py file right here, we are going to go ahead and import our token. So we called it our token block list. It's going to be our token block list with a small l. And once we've been able to import it, we have access to our DB object already. So we can go ahead and run db.create_all. And this will go ahead and create our database, but it seems like our database is not yet created. So let me try to refresh, or let me try to close the database and try to open it once again. So seems like our database has not been created. Let me try to recreate the database once again with db.create_all. And now I think this will go ahead and create our database. So if we go right here and we try to refresh, shall now see that our token blacklist or token block list table exists. So the reason as to why we've created this token block list table is to be able to help us to keep track of tokens that have been revoked. So these tokens will not be able to be in use once they have been revoked, meaning anyone who accesses these tokens will not be able to carry out any other requests. And for us to achieve that, Flask JWT Extended still provides for us handlers to help us be able to achieve this. So for us to be able to check for tokens before every request, we're going to go ahead and implement a handler using some decorators that are being provided for us by Flask JWT Extended. So what I'll do is to go where we actually went ahead and defined all that stuff. So we have all that stuff defined where we have a create app function or our application factory. So what we want to do is to go ahead and basically use our JWT object. So we shall say that our JWT object, which is going to be our JWT, we can go ahead and basically call our token block list. So this will be our token in block list callback, and our token in block list, our token in block list callback will be the function that will be called to basically return a response in case we have that JWT blocked or revoked. And our loader is going to be the specific decorator that's going to help us to be able to basically go ahead and help us to check if that JWT is revoked. So what we need to call in this case is going to be the token in block list loader. And what this is going to do is to basically take in a function or the handler, which is basically going to be the function to help us check if our JWT is revoked, or basically do that. So we shall basically come here and define our token in block list. So in this case, we're going to say, we're going to check our token block list. So we are now going to define this function as token block list, and actually want to call this token in block list. So this will be our token in block list callback, which is simply going to be a callback function that will be called to basically check if this JWT is revoked. So just like we did in these past examples when we are doing error handling, what we're going to do is to also require the JWT headers and the JWT data. And from this JWT data, we shall have access to the JWT identifier, or what we call the JTI. So once we get the JTI, then we'll have to query for our database to check if our token actually exists within our database. So for us to do that, we shall have to still provide those two specific attributes. So the first one is going to be our JWT header, and the second one is going to be the JWT data. Now the JWT data is going to be the specific claims that the token is going to have. If you haven't known about claims, please go ahead and check my previous video on JWT claims. So JWT claims are just basically going to give us the information that's hidden or encoded within our JWT. So once we've been able to get the access to this JWT data, what you shall have to do is to get the JTI. So the JWT data is simply going to be a dictionary containing the information about our token. So once you get the JTI, what we want to do is to access the JWT data. So this JWT data will have a JTI. If you looked at the claims video, you can understand how this comes about. So we shall access the key of JTI, and this will be basically enough to give us our JTI for that specific JWT. Now once we've been able to get the JTI, the next thing is going to be for us to query for our token. So for us to do that is basically going ahead and basically checking if it exists. So we're going to create a variable called token, and this token is going to be equal to, so in this case what we're going to do is to basically query for our token block list to check if JWT with our JTI actually exists. So I'll have to go ahead and first of all import our token block list model. So I'll come, and after importing our user model, I'll import our token block list. So I'll go down right where we have our token, and then what I have to do is to just come right here and say token block list dot query. So you can use the query API, or what you can do is to actually go ahead and use db.session dot, in this case I'll say query, and what I'll need to do is to basically provide the table or the class or the model that I want to go ahead and query for. Now if you're wondering why I'm doing this, I'm trying to use the scalars that come with SQL Alchemy 2.0 to basically go ahead and check if this token exists. So for me to be able to do that, I'll pass in the token block list class, and in this case what I want to do is to go ahead and basically check if the JWT exists in here. So what I'll do is to come right here and say dot filter. In this case I'll say filter, and what I want to do is to basically pass in a criterion. Now I may have something like, let's say, the token block list dot, in this case I want to check if the JTI is very similar or is actually the JTI that we get from our JWT data right here. So I can come and say if it's equal to the JTI, then in this case what we want to do is to basically return that specific JTI. So for me to return true or false if it exists, then I'll have to say dot scalar, and what this is going to do is to go ahead and basically dot scalar will return that specific object. If we say dot scalars, so this is actually going to be dot, and if we have scalar subquery, then we can have a scalar. Then what we want to do is to say dot scalar. So what this is going to do is to return the first element of the result, or none if no rows are present for that specific query. So this is SQL Alchemy 2.0 style of querying. If you haven't known how this works, you can check out my video on SQL Alchemy 2.0 where I basically went through how to basically query using this style of querying. Now once we've been able to get this token, what we need to do is to basically return a statement and basically be able to tell users that a certain token has been revoked. So to do that, what we need to do is to go ahead and return, and what we want to do is to return token is not none. So what this means is when we query for the token and it exists, then token is not none will be true, meaning that this will actually throw an error telling us that, you know what, this token has been revoked. And in case this token is none, then it's going to return false, meaning you can go ahead and basically carry out any request that you may carry out with a specific JWT. Now, if you've not understood this, what we're actually doing is getting a JWT, checking for its JTI, and then checking if that JTI exists within our database. If that JTI exists within our database, then what we're going to do is to return an error showing the user that that specific JWT they are trying to use has been revoked, and therefore they will not be able to use it in any request. I hope you've understood that. So once we've been able to query for that, then we're going to basically return token is not none. If it's none, then we shall be able to move on carrying out the request. If it's not none, then we shall throw an error showing a user that the token has been revoked. And that's how revoking actually works. So this callback right here is going to be called for every request that we shall carry out using a specific token. So once we've been able to achieve this, then the next thing is going to be to basically go ahead and basically log out a user. So to log out a user, what we're going to do is to basically add a token to our blacklist or our block list. I actually mistake this too, but it's going to be our token block list. And the way we're going to achieve that is by implementing a route. So I'll head over to our auth endpoint or our auth URLs right here. And what I have to do is to create a route. Now this is going to be at auth blueprint dot. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say, let me just say that this is going to be get. So let me call it a get endpoint, and it's going to be our / logout. Now what we're going to do is to define the handler function, and this is going to be our logout user. So our logout user is basically going to go ahead and basically be a protected route, so shall need a JWT to access this. Now in this case, what we're going to do is to come and say that shall require JWT to access this endpoint. So once we've been able to access this endpoint, the next thing is going to be for us to get the JWT claims of that specific JWT. And the way we get that is by basically coming right here and using the get JWT function. So once we've been able to get the JWT, all we need to do is to get the JTI of that specific JWT. And the way we do that is by basically coming and saying that the JTI will be equal to JWT, and then since that will be a dictionary, then we shall access it by the key of JTI. And once we've been able to do that, then the next thing is going to be for us to save that JWT to our block list. So to do that, what we're going to do is to go ahead and basically import our token block list model. So shall say import our token block list, and then at the bottom right here, what we're going to do is to go ahead and save. So we shall need to create a new token block list object. So to do that, shall say token block list, and in this case shall create our token block list. So what we can do is to go ahead and basically create this as our token, or let's say our token block list object, and this is going to be a new token block list object. But what we need in this case is our JTI, so we shall provide our JTI, and our JTI is going to be equal to our JTI. Now for that date at which we create this token is already automatically created for us, and also the primary key is going to be automatically generated for us. Therefore, if we just provide our JWT or our JTI, it will still work the same. To make this more interesting, what you can do is to go ahead and define a method on our models that's simply going to go ahead and save our token or our JTI. So to implement this, we shall basically create a save method, and this is going to take in self. Now shall use our DB instance or our DB object to basically add that to our session. So shall say db.session.add, and then we shall add that object, and then we shall finally commit it to our database by basically saying db.session.commit, and that will be enough for us to basically save those changes to our database. Now if we head over here in our auth, all we need to do is to go ahead and call token blacklist dot save, and that will be just enough to go ahead and save that specific token blacklist object or token blacklist object. So once we've been able to do this, then we shall return a message or a response. So we shall just come right here and say return JSONify, and in this case we want to basically return a message, and this message is going to be one for logged out successfully. So once we've been able to do this, we can also return a 200 status code, and that will be just enough to basically show how we've logged out a user. Now let us test this endpoint out. So what I'm going to do is to go and check if our server is running, of which it is. So I'll head over to our postman right here, and in our postman I'm going to create a new request, and oh, sorry for that, this is going to be our add request, and in this case I'm going to call this logout user, and I'll go ahead and basically call it a get request, just like I've implemented it right here. So this will be on our localhost 5000/auth, and in this case we shall have our logout. So once we have this, then the next thing is going to be for us to go ahead and log out our user. Now all we need is to access this endpoint with our authorization. So we are using bearer token authentication. So once we have our token, which is this specific token, we can go ahead and send it. Now this token has expired. Now let's go ahead and try to regain a token using our refresh token that we provide in this endpoint. If we get this token, I'm going to go ahead and copy it, and then I'll provide it within our request. So I'll go ahead and replace the current token that we have right here with our new token, and then send. We shall now see that our user is logged out successfully. Now let us try to use this revoked token to access an endpoint that is protected. So if you watch the previous videos, we implemented a route for getting a paginated list of all users that are present within our API or within our database. So for us to do that, I'll go right here. So here I just provided it in the authorization, but it's still the same thing if I do authorization and then bearer token authorization. So what I'll do is to come right here and I'll remove this token, and then I'll provide the token that has been revoked. So if we send, we're now going to see that our token has been revoked, meaning that we cannot access any other protected endpoint using that specific token, because at this point it has been revoked and it is not able to access other API endpoints. Now this is just for access tokens. We're going to look at how we basically also restrict refresh tokens. Now that we've been able to log out users by revoking their tokens, in this video we're going to look at how we can basically go ahead and also restrict refresh tokens from having to access endpoints once a user is logged out. Now in our logout endpoint right here, all we are doing is to basically provide an access token and then adding it to our block list. What if we went ahead and basically did the same thing for our refresh tokens? So for us to be able to do that for our refresh tokens, the thing we're going to do is to actually go ahead and basically change our endpoint so that it accepts any type of JWT, be it refresh or access. And when we get this, then what we shall do is to just simply go ahead and add it to our block list. So first, to achieve this, we are going to just come and modify our endpoint by modifying our JWT required decorator. And what we shall need in this case is going to be the verify type attribute or argument to that specific decorator. So inside here, we are going to provide a boolean, and when this is true, then we shall basically be only forced to access this route with only refresh tokens. And if we leave it to false, then that means that we are going to be able to provide both access and refresh tokens, and those tokens will be added onto our block list. So what we're going to do is to come right here and say false, and that will be very helpful, as it's going to allow us to provide both access and refresh tokens to this endpoint. Now, another thing we may do is to access the type of the token within our JWT claims. Now, if you watch the previous video, all we do is to go ahead and access the JWT. So in this case, we got the JTI. What we want to do is to get the token type. So I'm going to call this the token type. And the token type will simply be the JWT claim with the key of type. And this will basically return access or refresh depending on the type of token that we have provided. Now, one thing we may do is to also go ahead and change our message. So in this case, what we're going to do is to say so I'm just going to come right here and provide an F string, and what we shall do is to say that we are going to provide the token type. So shall just basically come and say the token type is going to be revoked. So shall just come right here and say token access token or refresh token revoked successfully. So this is the message that we're going to return for a successful login. So once we've been able to do this, I'm going to go ahead and save, and let's go ahead and try to log out a user again. So I'll open up my Postman. So right here in our Postman, what we're going to do is to go ahead and try to log out a user. So I'm going to get an access token. So if I try to basically, so right now we cannot be able to load the user John Doe. I think that user does not exist. So if we went ahead and created a new user, so the user is created. If we go ahead and use this same user to log in to access a token, go to the body, and then we shall provide the user details just like you see right here. We send this, we shall get an access and a refresh token. Now our goal is to go ahead and basically use this to log out. So I'll copy the access token right here and then go to logout. So in the headers or our authorization, I'll go ahead and provide this token. So I'll basically replace the token that we have here with a new token. And here we shall see that our access token has been revoked successfully. If you try to use this to access an endpoint, so let's go to where we get all our users. Now I'm going to change this authorization and make it use our new token. So I'll just come right here, and then I'll say that we shall provide a new token. So if we try to basically access that token, we shall see that that token has been revoked. Now let us try to also use our revoked refresh token to access a new token. If you go where we created our JWT pair, I'm going to copy our refresh token just like you see right here, and I'll basically go ahead and copy it. And when I go where we have our regain access, then I'll go ahead and provide that access token right here. So for now, we can be able to get a new access token, but if we go ahead and log out our user by basically providing that refresh token, we're now going to see that that refresh token has been revoked. Therefore, if we go back where we use that same access refresh token to get a new access token, we cannot be able to use that refresh token. So in this series of videos, we basically looked at how we can implement JWT authentication and authorizations using the Flask JWT extended library. We've looked at how we can basically create user accounts. We can log in users by helping them get JWT pairs. We've looked at things such as regaining access with refresh tokens, and also we've looked at things such as logging out users by enabling us to revoke their tokens. If you've liked this video, please leave a like and don't forget to share it with people who may find it useful. I've also created a Patreon account where I will be creating some videos that are on request by you members of my YouTube channel. Feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section about how you feel, and I hope to meet you in the next series of videos. Bye.